Thanks for joining us as we take a closer look at the recent release of Homestead. My name is John Newton, science fiction author, and I'm joined by a crew of amazing guests. And we'll start doing our introductions. I'll say one guest we do not have just yet, David Suarez, who's not here because he said he's caught in traffic. Famous last excuse. But since we're live streaming, it's like, what are we going to do? I don't know. But when he gets here, we'll let him introduce him. And why don't we start here with Ryan, who's sitting next to us?
Yes,
who are you?
Ryan Schultz. I'm also a science fiction writer as well and movie enthusiast. And I'm happy to be back on the show.
All right. Eric and the mysterious missing Elle, can you introduce yourselves?
Elle is unfortunately running late, but I will introduce myself at least, and I guess she'll jump on when she can. Like you said, I'm Eric. I do a YouTube channel called Your Brother in Christ, where we focus on apologetics, polemics, and evangelism, primarily focusing on Islam and all the details that encompasses. So I do a lot of call-ins, a lot of engagement on that end, and that's about it.
Okay. And Seth, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been on the show a few times now. Always a great experience, and I am also a science fiction writer. I love the dystopian genres as well, and so that's one reason why I was so excited to go watch and review this movie too. Just kind of that apocalyptic feel to it. So, really excited for the discussion tonight.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get started, we're going to be talking about a movie put together by Christians to tell a story that helps nudge our culture closer to Christ. At least that's the intent, but they're not alone. Each one of us can contribute to impacting our culture in a positive way instead of just passively riding along the wave to wherever the culture happens to take us. And I'm trying to do that with my science fiction short stories. And Eric, you are totally covered there, brother. And the Healing Stone novel, which is due to come out next month. I'm really excited about that when we see what happens with it. So if you like great science fiction or fantasy based on historical facts, this might be a story for you or somebody you love or even somebody you hate. Give it to them. The Healing Stone is coming out early next year, the end of next month, and available now on pre-order on Amazon. And check the link in the description. Everybody's waving their hands at you. Guys are great. Savannah and Eric's holding it up. So what is the movie Homestead all about? Homestead is a post-apocalyptic drama produced by Angel Studios, set in a world where society has collapsed and survivors must navigate a new lawless reality. The story centers around Jeff Erickson, a former Green Beret who leads the security at the Homestead, a prepper compound designed to protect a small community from external threats. As chaos ensues outside, tensions rise within the compound, revealing fractures with their unity. Jeff and the residents must confront their own fears, trust issues, and personal challenges. The film explores the themes of survival, faith, and the human spirit in the face of disaster. Also, a whole lot of ethical issues, which we're going to dive into with great fervor and lust later on in the show. Through moments of hope and sacrifice, Homestead presents a powerful narrative about family resilience and finding the purpose in most desperate of times. Okay, for everyone, including, and we'll get their responses for the latecomers who come in, but on a scale from 1 to 10, I haven't heard anybody's responses yet, and I'm anxious to hear it. How would you guys rate the movie? I don't care who goes first, just blurt it out. No spoilers. We're in spoiler-free territory right now. So
I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I gave it a 6 out of 10.
You gave it 6
out of 10.
Okay. And why?
Are we giving reasons?
Why would you? Yeah, just give us a little bit of spoiler-free reasons. Why you give it a 6 out of 10?
So without actually going into any of the plot points, I felt like the plot itself was a little bit incoherent. It seemed disconnected at times, and I really didn't like the ending, to be honest.
I can't wait to talk about the ending.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that. And I felt like they could have done a little bit better with like the world building in the background, which I get that wasn't necessarily the focus of the movie, but I feel like it was still relevant. And they kind of just didn't even go into it. Just didn't connect, in my opinion.
Okay.
But I enjoyed it. So it was enjoyable. So
you say it was enjoyable, and would you recommend this to somebody to go see?
I mean, sure. Yeah, it's a fun 2 hours. It certainly wasn't a waste of money to me. It just isn't like my most favorite movie in the world. So
okay. The popcorn may have been a waste of money, but not the movie itself. Gotcha.
Oh, I never buy popcorn at the theater. I'd rather sneak snacks in than do that.
That's exactly what we do. But don't tell Cinemark.
You guys are going to get yourselves in trouble. I think we're actually being recorded. Okay, so anybody else want to chime in? What would you give it between 1 and 10, and why?
Sure, I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I'd agree with them.
Whoa.
I say there were some big negatives in there. Again, most of those have revolved around where the story goes, how it's resolved. I think it was poorly handled. But we can get more into that once we get into spoiler territory.
Okay, so this is a guy who gave Dune, the recent release of Dune. Would you give it a 6?
I don't remember.
Call him out.
It was.
We need to record all these.
We got a lot of flack in the comment section about that because there's some diehard Dune fans out there like, what?
Difficult to
but I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of diehard fans.
You know what's so bad about it? I'd actually consider myself a pretty big fan of Dune in general.
Yeah, and that's why you graded it down, because you think, whoa, they really deviated here.
I would like to have reviewed Dune with you guys. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, same here. I loved both.
Well, tell you what, there's a second part coming out.
Part 2, yeah. Mm-hmm. We have to recap.
We'll do that. We also have, this is a little bit off subject right now, but there's also what's coming out in February. There's a new movie. New movie.
Is it Angel or is it?
No, it wasn't Angel Studios. It was in the trailers today. They were talking about it might. Well, you do have. Okay, this might be the Marvel film that's coming. I believe it's the Marvel film coming out. The Red Hulk and
the Winter Soldier.
Not Winter Soldier.
It's the Captain America.
Captain America and
Brave New World or something.
Yes, Brave New
World. Yeah, I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I have some low expectations about that, given the fact how many times they had to I will make you do it. I will drag you to it.
This is the fun.
So there's a possibility of doing that, and there's something else that's coming up because we'll talk about that in a bit too. There's some possibilities, but I do not mean to cut off. You didn't give your review.
Not yet. No.
What would you say?
I'll be a little bit more optimistic. I'll give it a 6.5. I know, right? A whole half point more. Look out. It's the season. Do you see this hat? Do you see how jolly I am?
You are giving. It is the season for giving. All right. You gave that half. Why the half?
I think this is a similar situation where it's to the Bonhoeffer series where like I have this inclination to give these type of movies a little bit more credit because I do think it is moving in the right direction. I don't think we're there yet in terms of like the quality of the movie, the writing. There's this kind of weird kind of Christian-y kind of production that sneaks into the writing and the plot that we haven't quite shaken off yet. I'm thinking like the peak of this was like God's Not Dead. Was like where it was like really like heavy-handed and just really poorly written and clearly written just for like Christian audience. You still get some of that in there, but it's in the right direction. So I want to like still support these things, and I still think that like I was entertained. Like I was entertained. I had a lot of eye roll moments, but it held my attention, and I had a good time.
Okay, I think we'll be talking about those eye roll moments here in a little bit. So I think I was giving it a little bit more than what you guys did. I bumped it up to a 7. I was rolling between 6 and 8 the whole time. Believe it or not, I did have a hard time with some of the writing in it. It was like, what? That doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and a lot of it did seem contrived for the sake of plot. But it does. I boosted it up because it does ask some questions. And here's another thing. When I sat in the theater waiting through all the previews and everything like that, a lot of it still is remakes, reboots,
that's true.
Sequels.
This is a new story.
You know, these are new stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I would give them a solid point just for
Sure. Yeah, I think
putting that out there. I
I
would
think
almost
it's true.
say 2 points. So listen, Hollywood, you guys are dead. Stop
Yeah.
rehashing this.
Was this based off of a book?
It was based off a series of books.
Okay.
By the way, and I'll add that right now. If you see the movie, this isn't really described, I don't think, a whole lot at all. I haven't seen anything about this at all in their advertisements for this, but this is basically the pilot to a series.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that as well. I wasn't sure if that was spoiler or not.
No, I wouldn't think that material would be spoiler because
Okay.
it's not really changing the movie, so to speak.
It was almost like a marketing twist. Like I've never seen gone to a movie before. It was like, surprise, this was almost like a really long pilot for a series. Like
Well,
I've
Like a bait
I
and switch
think
almost.
what's that?
I said it kind of felt like a bait and switch almost. Like you
A
think
little bit. Yeah, I want to talk about that some more. Yeah.
now I think that is that is definitely one of the reasons why I rated it low. Now, Elle is in the comments and she did give her rating. She said 5 or 6. And a lot of their huge problems could have been fixed with a couple of easy lines. Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to go ahead? Should I read her comments then?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and put them up. First of all, she said a 5 or a 6. I guess that means we get to pick whatever we want there, 5 or 6. Huge problems that could have been easy to fix, but some really good things. But those bad things are bad. Yeah, I think there needs to be some more vetting within their process. But it does entirely change. It does entirely change your perception of the movie. Okay, for me. For sure, my rating would have been much higher for a pilot. I think she's responding to what we were saying.
Pilot show.
Yeah.
And I would agree.
Yeah.
I think for me, one of the biggest things for me was there are so many Chekhov's guns, referring to that sort of.
You're just not talking about his arsenal, right?
No, I'm not. I'm talking about the gun that's on the mantelpiece. If you're writing a story, the gun that's on the mantelpiece that's loaded. By the end of the story, that needs to be fired. There needs to be some sort of resolution with it. And if it's a pilot for a series, I don't expect all of them to be answered.
Mm-hmm.
I expect a lot of them to be left open for the series to deal with. But I wasn't clear about that going in. I had high expectations of at least some resolutions, or at least a lot more resolutions than what they had in the actual movie itself. And again, I would have definitely rated it higher if they would have been honest with me and said that this was a pilot.
Do you guys know that
yeah.
feeling like when you're about to go drink something and you think it's like, let's say you think it's Dr. Pepper and that's what you want. And then you drink it and it's like a completely different drink. And it's like, ugh, like, what is this? That's kind of how I felt with this. It's like, I thought it was a self-contained movie. I never heard of anything about a series after this. And so I'm just like, what? Like, what is, if I had gone into it expecting that, I think my experience would have been a lot better leaving.
In fact, real quick, I know exactly how you feel. You see, one time when it was extremely hot summer day, I was going inside. I grabbed myself some grape juice, and John knows exactly which story I'm telling. And I thought, oh, great. I'm thirsty. It's been a hot day. I've been outside mowing the entire day. Oh, this is going to be great. I threw it back to drink it. My mother, for some reason, decided to put motor oil in a grape juice container into the refrigerator. And my mind was, why is this taking so long for this grape juice to hit my mouth? Before, oh, shoot, I got a mouthful of motor oil.
Wow. Okay.
That's the last time I just grabbed something out of the fridge.
Ever since then, he's been incredibly
perspective, and yes,
yeah, it just loosened everything up down there.
I wouldn't say it was that bad. I wouldn't compare it to motor oil, but it was definitely not what I was expecting.
Okay, so I'm going to take a quick look at some of the comments here. We have, okay, so this was a comment by Nicodemus Serpio. He says, spoiler alert, less than 10 minutes into this really isn't too much of a spoiler alert. I don't think too much. It says less than 10 minutes in, the protagonist don full body muzzles masked in order to avoid the fire in the sky. Oy vey, what's next, aliens? I think maybe that was kind of missed. I think that's in the beginning when there is a disaster that happens, and I'm not going to say exactly what it is, other than to say there was contaminants in the sky because of the nature of the type of device that was used for the disaster. That there were contaminants in the sky, so I don't think that was related to that at all. And then Andrew, skipping some of the stuff here. Andrew said, "Spoiler alert! Haven't even heard of it."
The movie?
Yeah.
Oh.
So that was a question that had come up before. Eric, you mentioned that before the live stream. You want to bring that up?
Yeah, I think this is one of the major disadvantages with Angel Studios is either like with Bonhoeffer, I think they did a really poor job advertising it, or whoever they hired to do the advertisement kind of betrayed it as like this super action-packed spy like assassination movie, and you get into it and that's not what it is.
You're talking about for Bonhoeffer.
For Bonhoeffer. For
Okay.
this one, you're thinking sort of survival, and there is that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But not that it's a pilot for an entire series.
Yeah.
And on top of that, a lot of people didn't hear about it because, again, although they are using some avenues to advertise for it, I think they are not getting the attention that they need from their advertisement group.
Yeah. I think that the marketing that I saw, they kind of almost had this weird kind of quasi-holiday marketing, like Christmas stuff with it. And it didn't really quite fit the movie at all, obviously, because it wasn't a holiday movie. But it does seem weird timing.
Neither was Die Hard.
Amen to that. No. But so, like, it's a weird timing, like a couple days before Christmas. I don't know who's going to go watch this movie. I think this movie would have been fine to release in January. I'm not sure why they were trying to sneak it into the right before Christmas crowd. I know that's a good popular time to go watch movies, but I just don't know who's going to go see this.
Yeah, the theme is a little bit dark. Well,
Yeah.
a lot dark compared to the holiday tradition.
movie,
Christmas, New Year's, Hanukkah. You got all this in here, right? And people are like, "This is the season for giving." Well, actually, for this movie, that might be appropriate. But there was some of that. Now, I did ask. I actually talked to a guy in the theater when I was there. And there weren't a whole lot of people there, right? Just before the movie started, I said, "Excuse me," I said, "I usually don't talk, in the theater. It's like strangers. You get in an elevator, you don't talk to anybody. And here's this weirdo coming up to him." But anyway, I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, how did you hear about this movie?" Because it was a whole question about advertising. And he did see on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook,
Okay.
through social media, he did see that. Now, I didn't see, I don't watch TV hardly at all in terms of, the old networks and so forth. So you don't see a whole lot there. And Angel Studios does not have the apparatus that big Hollywood studios have in order to make their advertisements. So anyway, that's one reason why I was thinking about that.
I saw it as a preview for Bonhoeffer. That's where I first saw this one. And I was like, oh, that looks interesting.
Yeah. I think that was probably where I heard it the first time too. Seth, was that your experience? You did not see a whole lot of advertisement?
Yeah, I didn't see any advertisement for it at all, except from the Bonhoeffer previews. So that was the first time I had heard of this as well.
Same here.
Okay. And we got another one here from Carol B. Says, dropping in to say hi. I haven't heard of
we
this
got another
movie.
one. Maybe we're advertising.
We're
for
the
movie
only
right
ones
now.
that saw it right here.
Yeah. Why would anyone tune in?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's see, explains. All right. They're still talking about your drink there, Eric. This explains why his beer
is that how that works?
is dark gray.
Oh, interesting.
All the oil.
Motor oil, I guess. How would I hear about movies? Yeah, I think, Carol, you just mostly
Social
read,
media.
right? So
Yeah.
maybe not. Yes, the trailer is on YouTube, and we're going to be taking a look at that here in a minute. Any other things that you guys would want to add to what you saw, the spoiler free, that you say, hey, you need to be looking out for, if you're going to see the movie, you're going to see, and you don't want to spoil it for somebody, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, so I think I have a thought on this. I do think this movie does really appeal to kind of that conservative prepper type mentality that's kind of keeping an eye on the news, wondering what's going to happen to our nation. Like this scratches that itch fairly well.
Okay.
And so if that's kind of your thing, and you're kind of like curious, like, oh, kind of what if, speculative, what is the nation going to turn into? And maybe I feel like a lot of people that are preppers are kind of like into the news from a conservative mindset, already kind of go through that in their mind, like what state is going to do what and what humanity is going to do. I think that really scratches that itch. So if you're into that and just want to see some fiction around that, I recommend it for sure.
I would say that with any movie of this kind, I'm always interested in the psychology shown, like just with people in general as chaos ensues and everything. And I will say that in the earlier parts of the movie, when the disaster is happening and everything, and you see some of the people like trying to figure out, oh, what am I going to do? Panicking. I thought they did that kind of well, honestly. I mean, they didn't get into it like too much, but you can kind of see like how dangerous things could get very quickly in a panic. Kind of like how somebody's drowning and you try and save them, you know, they're probably going to pull you under and drown both of you. It's like that is how people respond in emergencies a lot of times. And so for me, like watching it, it wasn't scratching an itch per se. It was just more like really getting me thinking about like, how would I handle this in this kind of chaos? Like, what would I do with that? Okay. And so I think it's interesting from that standpoint, whether or not the plot itself is good or bad or liked or whatever.
Yeah,
it's just an interesting viewpoint. So I kind of like it for that too.
Okay. Eric, what would you say to somebody who's going to go see this for the first time? You say, hey, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I might want to think about this.
Don't expect everything to be resolved, and expect to need to go subscribe to Angel Studios for the full version.
I wouldn't say that so much. I think they did wrap it up. There were some things that were, I mean, there was one major tension there was one major thing that was, I would say, kind of resolved, at least for the moment. And then that was it, and answer that question. And then we can talk when we get to the spoiler section. I really want to talk about that. So let's go through the trailer real quick. I want to get your guys' response on this. And then we're going into the spoiler part of this, talking about to share or not to share a biblical perspective. She made it. David Suarez, thank you very much for joining us. I'm glad you can make it.
Wait, that's not David.
That's Elle.
Do you put your glasses on, John?
Oh, yes. No. Okay. Real quick, would you like to introduce yourself before we see the trailer?
Hello, I'm Elle Iso Elohim, and I'm happy to join all of you guys. The purpose of, I guess, my life is to glorify God. And my catchphrase here on YouTube is, let's seek and share truth together better than ever before. I think this is an awesome opportunity through movies to use them as kind of a springboard to seek and share truth, see what God's trying to show us through them, see how we can show God through them to others. So you can check me out on my channel, which has quite a lot of resources already, and Lord willing, we'll have more.
Yes, indeed. And I think there's a link for your channel in the description of this this video as well. So yeah, you really perfectly said the purpose for this channel, just right there. I think I'll clip that, and that'll be the intro. So, awesome. All right, so let's take a look at the trailer and then get your guys' opinion.
Does the sun
America's just been attacked.
go on shining?
But this is the story of how it began.
Don't they know
After today,
it's the
our lives will never be the same.
We have looting and widespread panic.
Hey!
He has a place for us to go. We'll be together.
The city's on fire.
they know
Sometimes we think we're doing the right thing and then it all goes wrong.
it's the end of the world.
It's time for you to take full control. It's complicated. You think that you're above the law? You think that the rules aren't for you?
Is this an ark or is this a fortress?
It's our home.
It's the end.
right. A few comments, spoiler free, and then we roll it right into the spoiler section.
I always feel like the trailer itself, we need a spoiler warning for the movie. Like, there's just a number of things I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen. That was a pretty big plot point. Like, why did they show that in the trailer?
You may not really know kids they're firing gun and stuff like this. You may not really.
I guess so, but
yeah,
everything that was in the trailer kind of. Well, anyways.
Okay.
I feel like the trailer kind of made it seem more interesting than I actually found it to be in the theater. It points you in one direction, and then the movie's like this over here. And then
that's all trailers though, Seth.
Well, some are worse than others. And then the thing goes, I went into this movie thinking that Neil McDonough, however you say his last name, the guy that's playing, with the cowboy hat, bad guy in Christian movies, that guy, I was thinking he was going to be the villain just because that actor is like always the devil or antichrist figure or whatever. And then, so I don't know. It just like the trailer, in my opinion, did not do like a good job of like actually showing where the movie was going. I don't want to get too much into spoiler territory, but that was my reaction. It just seemed like something a lot different than what it really was.
Okay.
My reaction, my feeling from that, at least the sense I got, was sort of Fallout sort of feeling, like that angle on it. It's like the end of the world, everything's hitting the fan, and how do you survive?
It started off as that.
And it started off as that in a lot of ways, but I don't think it held up.
It's not as bad as Bonhoeffer. Bonhoeffer's trailer was awful for Bonhoeffer.
Well, yeah, the trailer itself was awesome, but when you watch the movie afterward, there was a much bigger disconnect with that one than
this was closer than that.
Yes.
I wouldn't go too hard on the trailer. I think that, in terms of any trailer that you do, it's not
it's quicker, it's eye-catching.
They do give you the basic idea that this is one of those survival things, and there are ethical issues to be dealt with. And that's why I gave it one of the reasons why I gave it a slightly higher rating too, is because these are good questions and hopefully spawn conversations. We're going to have this conversation here in a minute. And that is why I would say we are entering into spoiler territory. So spoiler warning for you if you've not seen the movie and you plan on seeing it, you don't want to hear what's going to happen and who dies and who doesn't and who becomes king of the universe. You may not want to watch further until you see the movie. So, all right, guys, we got the all clear sign. You can go ahead and say whatever you want. Oh my gosh, where do you start?
I mean,
the ethical questions are the biggest one, right?
Yes. And there's specific ethical questions. Oh, sorry. What?
You keep on going.
Yeah.
So there's a specific major ethical question that I wanted to be here specifically to discuss because I didn't want a bunch of men to have to say this. But
we would have totally
in a not sexist way, but people who are all like sexism. I wanted it to come from a woman and a wife who's very happy to be a wife. I do not want to watch a Christian movie where the entire conflict or the most major conflict in the movie is resolved by being a rebellious wife.
Oh.
And that's a deep concern of mine. I think it was very easily resolvable, but essentially, you start off the movie, there's this family who's helping out other families, but it's only select other families. And they're going to be this compound, essentially, that's going to help each other survive and keep the rest of the world out, keep themselves safe from the rest of the world. But the husband, he's responsible for the family, understandably. He's like, look, we've only got enough food for however many of us. That's how many we're going to have here. And we don't even have enough food for this many of us. This is a problem. So he's stressed out about that. Understandably, he has to take care of his family. And in her mind, she's like, look, these people are our friends that we're not letting into. They're like going to die if we don't help them. Like, I know that we don't want to die, but I don't want them to die either. Essentially, not in those words. So her mind is like, let's help everyone we possibly can. And his mind is, our family needs to help more, essentially, just to boil it down. And go ahead.
Okay. Well, quickly, there are 3 major times that she does this.
Well,
okay. just a minute, a little programming note. I'm gonna do something a little bit different this time. I'm gonna take our video off, so don't freak out, and then I'm just gonna have you guys, whoever is the speaker, is gonna be the focus. So
okay. So there are 3 major times that she does this.
I haven't even said what she does.
She undermines her husband 3 different times by going out and giving it, and stuff that could have easily been fixed just with a single line of dialogue. She takes food from their fridge that she sees that it's going to expire, and she goes and hands it out before it expires to the people that are at the gate.
That's the first time that she does
That's the first time. And that could have easily been resolved where basically the husband said, no, we're not giving anything. And she goes literally behind his back while he's trying to resolve this tension and starts handing out food and almost gets trampled because she did this. And it could have easily been resolved by her just saying, hey, this food's going to expire. Just explain just a little bit of her plan, and then the husband signed off on it. Perfectly fine. But there's no communication until after she's already done this. And she does this with other food that was possibly going to go bad, but he thought he could still preserve it. She went ahead and gave it away as well. And it seemed like the entire time she's backbiting a little bit.
okay, so let me paint the picture here for those who are hanging around in spoiler territory, haven't seen it before. So basically, the idea is nuclear bomb goes off, and it was a dirty bomb in the beginning.
Nuclear, but
they call it nuclear.
They call it nuclear, but that's a miss.
Well, may have been.
It's a combination.
Packed with radioactive, because you look in the boat and it's got this.
True, but it's not what most people would assume would be a nuclear. This is not like a nuclear. It's not like an IBM, nuclear IBM that goes off. This is not like fallout explosion with mushroom.
Right. Okay. So that goes off in the beginning. You got the typical disaster movie, everybody trying to get out. You do have these people that get out to the Rockies, and this is where this compound is. Basically, this really rich guy has this beautiful house up there, and it's gated. And he's worked it out. He's basically prepped. He's got all these guns, he's got all this food, and he's got it all. I mean, he is like a super prepper, right? He's got it all done, and he's going to share it with his friends and family. The tension of the movie is, and then what? Because you're thinking about how you're basically prepping. You're thinking about yourself, as you should. You got to take care of your family first. And then, I'll give it to some friends and stuff like that, but there's a limit to how much I can do. But then all these other people come to his gate to say, my family is starving. We've already seen one wife and mother steal somebody else's car because she had to take care of her kids over someone else, and that type of thing that's happening in the movie. So all this is happening. The main tension of the movie is all these people at the gate. What are you going to do? And so this is where the wife went around and made that. I'm going to bring up the cast here to make sure that we get the people's names here. This is Jenna Ross, who's played by Don Oliveri, and Neil McDonough. That I'm not sure if you have to pronounce his name that way, but that's the way I'm going to say it. Is Ian Ross. That is her husband, and so the two of them own this house, this castle, basically up in the mountains, and they're the ones who are sharing or being asked by 24, 3 people at the gate to share their food with their families.
Yeah, another interesting tension they added was that.
Well, wait a second. I don't know if you two, did you finish saying what you were going to say? I was just giving background for this. So go ahead and wrap it up.
So I do think that it's very accurate and very realistic that a husband and wife would disagree on this. I think a lot of people in the audience, as you guys have mentioned, are sitting there like, what would I do? And how do you deal with those problems? And how do you wrestle through this? Do you help everyone, or do you help your family? Is it worth your kids dying in order to keep other people's kids alive? Like, these are really hard questions. I'm fine with that being realistic and the wife going against the husband for the sake of the movie to show this conflict. What I'm not okay with is endorsing it as like, this is a good thing, unless it's shown that it really is a good thing and that God told her to do something, because we have a biblical hierarchy. If this is a Christian movie, we're told, wives, submit to your husbands. It's not this evil thing that feminists make it out to be, but ultimately we are supposed to submit to God. And so we do have a biblical example of this woman in the Bible named Abigail who did go against her husband, but it's shown that it was actually a moral thing in her case, because her husband was doing something that was evil. And you guys can go and read about that, her interaction with David in the Bible. I think that's an interesting story, but that's not just a blanket like excuse for wives to go against their husbands, unless, again, there's a biblical reason why. God takes precedent. He always takes precedent. So if the husband's doing something unbiblical, then that's different. But there could have been any line in there like, look, I know you're saying don't share, but God is really showing me this is what we need to do. Or, look, I know you're doing this, but that seems wrong to me. I really think we should do this. And I want to respect you or whatever, but I need to do what's right, even if it's not what you want. There could have been anything like that, but there wasn't. And the resolution to the movie, essentially, which there wasn't even really a resolution, but the resolution was the best thing that I could have possibly done for everybody was to ignore my husband. And that saved us all.
Yeah,
it's
that
like,
was quite a message.
Why?
Yeah, so she waits until he's out of the picture, basically. He's not able to be, and they don't have like a chain of commands stated. Again, this would have been very different if it would have been stated, here's the chain of command. I am the leader, then my wife. If I'm not available, my wife's in charge, and then break down from there. I could understand that. Okay. Then if he's incapacitated, like he was in the movie, then she would be naturally in charge, take over, and yeah, she might have a different direction that she's thinking that she needs to go. But she wasn't, and it seemed like, very quickly after he was unable to make the decisions, she decides to just ram through whatever she desired, which she was trying to do the entire time behind his back. And it seemed like, man, that seems like...
Well, it was also under the pretense that she was like praying all night and all day, waiting for her husband to come back. And then one morning when the light came up, it was like this epiphany moment where God spoke directly to her. And it felt like it was very spiritualized, this kind of like decision, like it was God himself that kind of like entered into his life or her life and gave her this kind of...
She was trying to talk to him several times, but he was busy. But I don't think he was being really obtuse and not just like shutting her down right away. I think it was just a matter of time that she would have won him over. She would have talked to him.
He was being stubborn, and like there was growth for that character. And I think that's good for characters, to have flaws and to grow. I have a very interesting thought that I think you could have kept this movie almost the same. And like even the whole behind the back stuff, because like I think that was an interesting choice. I think there need to be consequences to it. At the very end, it was almost like absurd, the amount of like, oh, and I let them all in. And it turned out it was the best decision ever. Like everyone that came in helped and contributed, and all our problems were solved. And I trusted God, and look at this person. He was able to do this to help for us. And we had an abundance. And look, just believe in God. I think you could have done the same whole behind the back thing and like had her go do this thing, but there needed to be a consequence. There needed to be a reason why that was a bad idea. And here's my thought. I think very simply, we would have had the perspective of one of the people at the gate and like kind of almost like the secret malicious intention for getting inside. That would have been so much more interesting. They're like plotting against them, and like maybe they're the ones that went and lit the barn on fire and stuff like that, because that was completely unresolved. Like, what was that about? They lit this hoarder's thing on fire, and then
we never got back to that.
Was that about? Yeah, it was just to add some tension, and it was completely unresolved. If you could have had someone that was trying to get in there to like mess things up, and you can
even the friend of the guy that died, like there was something there they could have done, like maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so many avenues they could have gone to, and then like when the wife lets them all in, you see these individuals that are coming in, and they're kind of like, oh yeah, we're in now, and that makes so much more intrigue and tension to go watch the series then, and then it shows that like, okay, this woman's choice has consequences. I know it seems right and giving and loving, the Christian thing to do, but guess what? It's not that cut and dry. It would have been so much better of a story.
Yeah.
I think if they would have done that simple thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like they were really lazy with how they promoted the series, because it's like they don't really prepare you for this not just being a standalone movie. And then you finally get to the end, everything's unresolved, and their way to draw you into the series is just, oh, here's this psychic character, this little girl who's been here the whole time. She saw what she saw. Let's find out, you know? And it's like, then it shows you like a fast montage of all these different random things from the show. And it's like, wait, what? Like, what is happening?
Pathetic little girl.
Yeah,
Oh,
Georgie,
Southern
the little girl. I was like, so I don't know.
Yeah, if they would have dabbled a little bit more in that, because she did draw that picture, but then that was kind of it. She just kind of like stood around, was kind of weird. And then like if maybe they just
character development from it. It says like 2 lines in the whole movie. And when she drew the poster, it was like in the first 5 minutes of the movie. So you go from that all the way to the end with nothing in between. It's just like, what? I don't know.
So real quick, as far as story writing goes, since I got so many authors here anyway, and I know this is a rule, so this is kind of just for the audience's sake. If you open up with characters and be like, this is the family that we're studying. Look, this girl has these special abilities, and focus on this family here. Well, actually, the family of the original explosion, and then not touch on them again for 99% of the movie until the very end. It's like, okay, hold on, weren't those the main characters at the beginning?
False.
Also, what happened with that first family with Malcolm, the husband? He's there like in the city. He's like, okay, you guys, you know, you need to don't breathe the air. Go get to the homestead. You know, we're gonna do this. And then you just never see him again until the end of the movie, and he comes back and he's crazy. He's just like,
nuts.
like, what the heck happened to this
I
guy?
want to know how he became an executive in with the corner office like he had in High Rise. If he was off his meds and the guy's like, yeah, FEMA's coming, everything's great, guys. And he's just nuts.
Let's go to Vegas.
Yeah, went to Vegas, chilled out there while his family's fighting for their life, and they're like,
he's like, what's the big deal, bro? Like,
I guess you could be an executive on
meds, yeah.
On meds.
I didn't mind that too. I'm glad that he was off his meds was the reason, rather than he was just an incompetent husband. Because I was like, when he first showed up, I'm like, this makes no sense at all. But when the whole like lack of meds things, I was like, well, I guess that kind of makes sense in like a apocalyptic scenario. People would have a hard time getting their medication.
Yeah.
And so that would happen.
Yes.
So that was
that did. I take it back. That does make a little more sense.
Well, they did establish the medicine at the very beginning of the movie. Like,
Yeah, I
this
thought
one family that it starts following is like, no, we need to get medication on our way. Like,
I missed that. Oh, my bad. I missed that detail.
But there was a different family. It was the second family that we followed.
Yeah.
The woman the wife ran into the store while all these people were duking it out over toilet paper and stuff. She comes back with a tiny little bag, and it's like, what? And the husband's like, what'd you get? And she says, medicine for Maxie or something. Not starting this off with a sick kid.
But you know what? They didn't have
that actually made incredible amount of sense.
Yeah, but they had that go bag. They had everything, a bug out bag for everything.
They should have.
Unless it was just, if it wasn't chronic, it was something that was just temporary, then I could understand it.
Yeah, something new that came up. They were going to go get it anyway, and boom, this event happened.
Okay.
But as far as he goes, this was something that was supposed to, at least the wife explained it as something that was new that just happened not too long ago. And she was keeping it from the rest of her family. So it's something that happened after their marriage. He started going on these drugs. I still have a hard time thinking, okay, how did he get to the position he is if off the drugs, he is, just an absolute loon. Yeah, that's the only way you can explain it. He's just not there.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the next section here because I don't want to trash this movie too much. There was a lot of things writing. That's why you need good authors, by the way, people.
Yeah.
Okay. Just anyway, was an enjoyable movie. Did like it. Did raise some good questions, and those are the questions that we're going to get to. Usually, at this point, we give a thematic review. There are asking the question, what Christian themes are there in this movie that we can use to deliver a hope of message of hope and instruction to a dying world. So that's what we usually do in this part of the live stream. However, that works well even with secular movies, but in this case, the entire Christian movie is a theme that asks an ethical question with no easy answer to give. This is the question that would be asked in this movie. I'm thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but this is a question that would be asked. How much should we give? If you wrap it up in one question, would you say that is the ethical question here?
I think mostly, but also there was a really big part of like, do you trust God or yourself? I feel like is what also they were getting at, which kind of ties
in relation to giving, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I almost wonder if it's less about giving, more about protecting or sustaining, because like it wasn't so much like you donate some money. It was more like these people needed like constant protection. They needed like a place to live, and that's a whole different sacrifice than just like a momentary give. It's like a perpetual, almost like closer to like an adoption or something like that. These people are under your roof and
that's
your responsibility.
That's a good question. All right.
I would say as a general thing, how much do you trust in yourself versus God? But as far as your question, the giving thing, like as far as how they kind of merge, like how much sacrifice for yourself and your family are you willing to make for others and their families? Because that really shows like, it's not just the giving of food or the giving of whatever, but the losing of yourself and a physical labor, physical space, not just giving it up, but I don't know if that makes sense what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, Elle, to go with your thought, I think it's like the word you use was sacrifice. I think when we give nowadays, I mean, there's a little bit of a cost, but like this was like clearly there was a much bigger sacrifice involved where their own people may, starve or be in danger in some capacity. Right. It's a much bigger ask than just like giving someone a couple bucks or a present or something like that.
Yeah, John, I think you had the right intent with your question, and I think that you are correct in that. Just the framing of like Ryan is saying, like our minds as Americans, even when we're poor Americans, we still have so much that giving, we don't always have that sense of loss and of sacrifice and of hardship because of that. Because I can give away all of the Christmas presents that we have, and like that's not great for our family or whatever, but like we'll be okay. Yeah. We're not gonna like die if I give away all of our Christmas presents. But like,
so the main question is, how far do you go with giving? And I think the answer, as a very general question, as being the ethical theme of this movie that we're hitting. Would you agree, Seth, that that's pretty much it? There's other parts that are there, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, so unlike school math problems, the answer to this question is not in the back of the book, but it's written through the entire book. So here's my question to you, scholars and academics and people who have been walking with Christ. What does the Bible say about that?
I think in this, again, it depends on which situation we're looking at. If we're looking at this specific situation for the movie, we see two extreme polar opposites being shown. Either the husband who just like, no, I'm going to hold on to what we have here because what we have here is barely enough to get us through winter. And if I let other people in, then maybe we won't even have enough to get through winter and we're all going to end up starving together. Or the wife's standpoint where let's give it away and hope God replenishes it. I think there was a middle ground that they did not approach that I think they could have definitely did, which was slow integration of those who were coming. Where you have people that friends that he knew personally that would support him, integrate those into your group, and then go from there integration-wise.
Absolutely.
in order to expand your productivity as well as your capability of being able to produce food and survive as a group without upsetting the political, because you're talking about political balance still within there, and that was something that really wasn't resolved again, which was annoying, which I thought if they would have resolved this one thing, I would have been actually pretty happy with the movie, which is the
okay. So back to my question though. I'm asking for biblical passages on this. Can you think of anything that in the Bible that does talk about giving, especially at the limits of giving, not just in general giving, but the limits of giving?
Yeah, so I have two pulled up. Although it looks like I might have overridden one on accident. First, I will say Christ is our ultimate example. So if we look to Christ, we know what Christ's answer was in his specific circumstance. And that was, how much was he willing to give? Everything. His health, his happiness, his life. He was willing to give everything. Now, granted, that wasn't just for one person. That wasn't just for two people. That wasn't just for 24 people. That was for all of us. But he was willing to give everything, all at his own expense, extreme expense. And that was not just for a day of food or 2 days of food. That was because we have all sinned. This is an expense that we cannot pay. And he, by his death and resurrection, paid for our sins and opened up his arms for us to be in a restored relationship with him. Now he does set guidelines for us and what we're to do. Similarly to what he did, but on a very, very small scale, we see that greater love has no one than this, that he would give his life for his friend. He would lay down his life for his friend. And so we do see in some circumstances, not as a general across the board every circumstance, but in some circumstances, it is better for us to lay down our life for someone else. It is worth it for us to give everything of our own. But on the other hand, if we look at passages, and this might seem like a severe stretch.
Okay. Just I'm going to cut you off just a bit because there's so many people here, and I got somebody else who just joined. We want to be careful on doing this. You brought that one passage up. We'll go with that, and we'll see what other passages other people have. Okay. So which passage would you bring if you're going to pull up one? I know that's not going to be the entire balance. We're not going to do a whole theological lesson here, but one particular passage that you would pick out of this, and you guys think of this too. Which one was it that you said?
Just come back to me because I'll give two when you come back to me, I guess.
Okay. And then I'll bring on David. Welcome. And you are muted.
My bad. There we go. Can y'all hear me?
David, we can hear you.
David.
Nice. How y'all doing?
So if give us a short introduction of yourself, and then we'll dive into your view of the movie just real briefly.
All right. My name is David, and I love doing theological, philosophical, biblical, and historical analysis of Christian beliefs since Bible times to now. And I also love doing political philosophy too. And this movie was really interesting, mostly because of the ethical dilemmas. I thought the story was interesting, but I guess I've seen enough apocalyptic films to not be too impressed by a lot of it. I thought the Christian ethics question was actually way more interesting. So, John, I'm glad that you brought that up. That's the thing that I'm way more interested in, to be honest.
And what would you give it on a scale from 1 to 10?
I would say it is above a lot of other apocalyptic films I've seen, so I'm probably going to give that like a 6.5 to a 7.
Wow, talk about solid results.
Yeah, I'm not going to go too far. There's some annoyances to the ending, but I guess you guys have already covered that. As I was slipping and sliding down the road a couple minutes ago, I was like, hey, they kind of get the weird rushed, like just didn't really give the conclusion I was hoping. But I did think there was an interesting question about national identity, how that plays into Christian identity, Christian ethics, and also political philosophy throughout the film. So as a result, I really did think what the movie proposed and offers up is really interesting. And there are a few moments where it slam dunks. There's a few moments on the ethical question. And then other moments where they toss it up, and I think on purpose, they don't necessarily answer a specific way. But I think the movie does a pretty good job at something called virtue ethics, which is a pretty Christian and predominantly New Testament concept. So I appreciated the film's attempt at that. That was cool.
Okay. So we are in the middle of going through and asking the question, what does the Bible say? The main crux of the movie is about how far should sharing go, basically. I mean, you can put other nuances to it than that, but that's the main question. And so the question that I have, and I probably need to encapsulate this a little bit better, is what biblical verses, and I'm putting you guys on the spot because I don't know what the passage is or whatever. So if you have a chance to look it up while someone else is sharing, what biblical verses or passages do you know that speak directly to this? And I know that we're not going to be able to, we don't have time for everybody to give a full treatise on this, as much as I would love to do that. So if you could share what that passage is, talk about it for a minute, and then we'll go on to the next person. Elle brought up, and do you have that passage now, or?
Well, I have a list of passages, so that's why I was saying come back. That way I can give all the citations, because I've got like. Are you wanting me to go through passages? I thought you were going to ask other people first.
I can ask other people first if you're not ready. Just narrow it down.
I'm ready, but you wanted to limit it down.
Yes, please.
All right. So the most important one for this movie, then, that I've not already said, would be 1 Timothy 5:8.
I was going to bring that up. No.
All right, I can move on to another one and let you talk about that one. Then that's fine.
I have one too.
So 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Okay.
There's the proof. Thanks, David. We weren't sure.
Now, I'll make this comment to it, and I have to. I think that was a really good selection because it helps encapsulate it as much as possible. We could look at everything that Jesus said, everything that's throughout the New Testament. Would everybody? Okay, let me ask before we move on to other passages. Let me ask this question to everybody here: does the Bible provide a "this is it in all cases" answer, or is it a it depends, and here are the two principles or more that you work with?
Yeah, definitely more on that.
It gives you the moral guidelines to be able to make a decision based upon what the situation is and the leading of the Holy Spirit at that time.
And so it doesn't matter if you pull off the wing of the fly if he ends in your soup or not.
Yeah,
it's not one of those answers.
The reason I picked that specific verse of all the other ones that I had is because this isn't about laying down your life for others, although that is in the Bible. That's important. But it's also not a cut and dry question of how much should I sacrifice of myself. It's a question of, yes, I should sacrifice of myself, but is that for others in general, or specifically first for my family? And the answer is first for my family, because anyone who doesn't provide for their family is worse than an unbeliever.
Okay, great answer. Great answer. Okay, somebody else.
Okay, so I actually have a passage that I feel like kind of touches on the other side of this. And it's really interesting because throughout the whole movie, I feel like the real concept they're going for is, do the ends justify the means, which kind of ties into this question right here. And so the passage I have is from Matthew chapter 5, starting at verse 38. Jesus says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. And that is a very difficult passage, I think, for Christians of any time period to really grapple with. And I feel like that's kind of also at the heart of the movie as well, because you have all these people at the gate who are begging from them, who are asking for them. And then you kind of have to balance that with, well, am I putting these people over my family? Am I hurting, harming, or even killing my family to help them? And so you have this really big, honestly, kind of dichotomy here between scriptural guidelines. And I'm not going to get into like all of the nuances of that, because you could talk about that for 10 hours easily. But I think there are different cases where there is a prioritization of your resources for your family, because like Elle said, you do have an obligation to them first and foremost. But then also, I think there's also an element of where you would kind of trust God in that, where if God is telling you, hey, I want you to be a beacon of light for these people, I want you to do that, to also kind of be able to, not just let your talk be cheap, but actually have the faith to back up your words and the actions to back it up. Kind of like James talks about with, faith without works is dead. Or no, I'm sorry. Is it the other way around? I don't know. My brain is.
No, faith without works is dead. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I got like 4 hours of sleep. So I'm okay. But anyway, it's like they can say, oh yeah, we trust in God. God meets our needs. God does whatever. They can say that when everything's good. But then when everything's limited, it's like, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that the God you serve is the same God that produced infinite, oil for the widow and her son when the prophet came to stay with him? Do you believe this is the same God that produced all of this food for everybody from, a few pieces of bread and some fish, which they actually did bring up in the movie? And so I think that's like a really big part of it, is like, how much do you trust God and what is he telling you to do in that situation?
Okay,
and so, yeah.
That's good. So, it's a lot of question about how much wasn't that one of the temptations that Satan gave Jesus, is like, if you really trusted God, you throw yourself off here, and the angels, he'll protect you, you just throw caution to the wind. I mean, that's basically what the temptation was, right? To do that. All right. So Eric, you got something there that you wanted to?
Yeah. I got, it's the parable from Luke 12:16 through 21. That's the parable of the rich, foolish man who goes out. He's preparing everything. He has plenty. He has more than what he needs. Now, in this case of this movie, this is a bit different situation. This is what the Bible gives you morals to be able to judge by. In the case of the rich, foolish man, he's all self-centered. He's just going to keep stacking up things here in this life. And, well, he dies. And it all goes to waste. Where in this movie, the husband seems to be preparing what he can for his family to survive, and then surplus from there be willing to share.
He was already sharing with people.
He was willing to do it.
Yeah.
If he had the surplus.
Well, I mean, he had other people with him already. He was already sharing within that smaller group, right?
Yes, he let the first group in because he knew he had enough to be able to share. That's what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. I'm agreeing with you.
So yeah, that's where I would go with it. At least that's the first one that comes to mind, that parable.
All right, somebody else?
So the way to deal with it, and I think the most simple way to deal with it, again, is the virtue ethics approach. Virtue ethics, to simplify a much larger discussion, is just an approach to ethics where you say that there is a proper virtue that you're to pursue, and the way to know right from wrong is to envision this most virtuous person in your mind. So the ancient Greeks, like, I don't know, Plato, Aristotle, or something. But Christians had a very perfect example, the perfect example for our virtue ethics, which was Christ, and is Christ. As a matter of fact, virtue ethics made a resurgence in like the 80s or 90s with a classic bracelet that had WWJD on it. And it was called What Would Jesus Do? So an extremely advanced ethical principle that was just a pop culture phrase, oddly enough. I think the difficulty is understanding what love actually is, right? To understand love is, in all cases, always to desire the good of another. That is what love is according to the scripture. If you want to look at 1 John 4:8 or 1 John 4:16 to see how it describes God as being love, right? And we can look at that a bit. Right here, the one who does not love does not know God, for God is love. By this, the love of God was manifested in us, that God has sent his only begotten Son into the world so that we might live through him. And this is love, not that we loved God, but that he first loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we also ought to love one another. And then it continues on, right, over and over about the nature until verse 16, where it says, again, God is love. What that's saying besides the way that it's been misused by certain groups politically that are also usually not Christian, is this. Love is desiring the good of another, or desiring that which is best for another. So I think the movie is trying to say that there is a grounding of love that drives every single choice that is at the center of the film. But there is a priority of love. Just like what Elle was reading before and elsewhere, there is a priority of love to God first, to those people whom God has entrusted to you primarily second, and then to your community more broadly, and to those who are suffering outside of it. So there is a priority of love. And we
okay.
and
So what? I know that you brought it up again. What was the passage for this?
That'll be 1 John 4:8 to 1
Okay.
John 4:16, which defines what love is in the most broad Christian sense.
Okay, cool. You got one?
I know that James talks a lot about, faith without deeds is dead. I know, I feel like, though, you could take that scripture out of context for this movie. I don't think that, like, he is completely without deeds, I suppose. Like,
so was it this one here? If you could take one of those, oops, not that one.
James 2, yeah.
James 2:15 through 16. Suppose a brother or sister without clothes or daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? So this is within the means and within that hierarchy of priorities that David was just talking about, correct?
Yeah, I have a feeling someone could totally use that scripture at the gate, be like, "Hey, James 2, like, let us in," type deal. But like, maybe that's not as clear cut as like it may seem that it is.
Okay. So I think everybody shared a passage here, and we could easily go on 5 hours and have a great discussion on this. I mean, I'm serious. All of you guys have something really good to share, and probably from your own experiences too. And I would say that the situation that I ran into, everybody can give an example probably of when they've been taken advantage by somebody when you were trying to be giving to that person, and you find out that you were just they're just taking you for a ride. And so there's some wisdom on how to handle that as well. So I'm going to take a look at the comments real quick before we move on, because I know there's been a lot that's been going on there about that. There's let's see. What is all this Bible chatter? I thought we were doing a movie review.
That happens.
That's because we're viewing this biblically, brother. And, that's where our theology is based on. So that's why we would look at this and say, okay, and especially from a Christian movie too, how would our morals should be placed according to what the Bible says? And that's where all these verses and more that we could talk about that would cover that. So it's a good question. That's what all the chatter is about.
Yeah, we could probably relate the scriptures more to specific parts of the movie a little bit more, but
yeah, okay. So let's do that. Let's go around and say at the end, the wife, like you said, Elle, had basically gone against her husband's wishes on securing the compound. It was a pretty big decision. See, she said, "I just let everybody in because I knew that that's what God wanted." Maybe not. It's the whole thing. It's like, well, God's going to provide our needs, so we'll just throw caution to the wind. Maybe that's the best situation. What do you guys think? Was there a wrong decision that she made? Not just about the whole, husband thing, but I'm talking in general. Was it a bad idea either to share a little bit there at the gate and then let everybody in?
I wonder if so. This is difficult, right? Because I feel like the difference is that in the movie, or at least the way I would have understood it, it seems like there's this very strong leading of the Holy Spirit for this wife that led to that decision. In a lot of cases, though, you don't necessarily feel this strong, voice of God clearly speaking to you. There's definitely some moments in my life where the voice of God clearly spoke to me, and I'm like, all right, I won't do what I was going to do. I was clearly foolish and wrong for my choice. So those happen, and I feel like maybe if you read into it, that's probably what she had, and so that's why it worked out. But a lot of times we have to, again, not Muslims, right? So it's not like we believe that every single specific action needs to be specifically verified in this way or that way. It takes a true development of wisdom that God grows in the individual to know what's the best option, even if he doesn't strictly speak to you. So I don't know if I could take her action and choice and generalize it for anyone, unless they think that God is like directly speaking to them and saying, "Open the gates, release the gate," you know.
Let everyone in.
Well, just
Can
to
I
add
say
in real quick on that, I kind of have a hard time thinking that that would have been the Holy Spirit saying it, because it's something she wanted all along. And the times that God has told me to do things and have those sort of interactions are times that he's leading me against what I naturally want to do. So if this was something that she was like, I'm not going to do this, I don't think it's right, and then the Holy Spirit's like, no, you need to do this, and it's like, okay, no, I'm going to follow the leading, even though in my mind it seems stupid. Okay, I could kind of see that perspective, but it seemed like
Good point.
is what she wanted to do all along,
Yeah,
and she just used it as an excuse to do it.
Real quick on that, I think that actually gives a wonderful idea of how the movie would have been fixed. My first proposal for that was that it's actually stated not just, oh, I saw the light, but God told me, go ahead, would have fixed it. But a secondary fix that isn't that could have been if the wife had been shot and the husband said, the sun came up. And I realized the light was with us all along. And he went and let the people in.
That
and
would have been
he
incredibly
went
different.
against,
Oh, yeah.
He had been telling his wife no all along, but you know what? No, this is wrong. I need to change myself. And he had let them in. That would have been wonderful. I would have
That's a good
rated this
point.
like a 9 or a 10, actually, if that was the case.
So I want to know why you're not writing novels.
I actually used to. It's been a long time. I got
Okay,
a lot of
well,
other
you,
stuff.
you got a good ear for storytelling. That I think that would have. I agree with you. I think it would have really turned it.
Here, can I say something too to add to that?
No.
So 2 things. First one, really quick. I think another potential fix they could have done to kind of go along with that is if the whole time they had where Ian, the father and husband, was wanting to let them in, and it was the wife that was saying, no, you have to think about the kids, you have to do whatever, because you do see that theme sometimes in stories where, you know, the wife or the mother is like, well, actually, I think that's reckless, I don't think you should do that, that's not safe, that's not the wise thing. And so it could have been where you know, she was advocating for that the whole time, to like not let them in at all, and then when he goes under, you know, for her to have like a change of heart. But then the second thing that I would say is, although it is a fair point that like one way that you know it's God telling you to do something is if it goes against what you naturally want to do, I will say that doesn't necessarily invalidate this being God, because I think also you could argue that God, foreknowing this, could have already been putting on her heart, you know, hey, I want you to do this. And one thing that I would say in support of that is because everybody's flesh is already naturally like, I want to hoard and just keep myself safe, right? So her at all wanting to share, I feel like would be, you know, probably God working on her heart, because it is antithetical to the natural human drive. And just like looking at like real world examples of people like George Mueller or other missionaries who God has like called to like, hey, you may not have the resources on your own, but I want you to do this thing. And then God provides. I feel like, you know, like it is kind of cohesive. Like I feel like it does fit in with like real world, you know, God interacting with us. So
Did you happen to read the chat section when you said that?
No, I have not been looking at the chat.
Thomas Hall said, reminds me of George Mueller saying that he would ask for no help except through prayer to God alone to run his orphanage. So it's funny that you guys are on the.
I've been thinking about George Mueller like the whole time with just, yeah, he's like a personal hero of mine. So that's really cool. Thank you, Thomas, for saying that.
That's cool. That's cool. So I'm going to ask some questions here, some moral questions concerning that. That was really kind of the first one. Is it morally justifiable to withhold life-saving resources from others to ensure your own survival? We kind of answered this a bit again, but I want to see if I could take a slightly different take on this.
So
Raise his hand.
If it's just I'm sorry, I have so many students in class that I just have mentally the idea of raising hands now. It's hard to break. I'm a good example for my students, all the ones who watch. I know some of y'all do.
In case they're watching.
Yeah, just in case. So I think if it was just me, then I could understand reducing or decreasing the amount of survival related and survival necessary goods present to myself for the sake of helping others. The difficulty is when it's not just me, it's not just my survival, but the survival of myself and then others. And so I have to choose between myself and my family, or myself and my friends, over this other group of people. So if it was just me, then I'd be like, no, it's morally justifiable for me to give of my own resources and of my own life, or even just to give my life by myself to let them live. It's just difficult when there's other lives on the line besides just my own.
Yeah, and I think with that, David, like the other side of that is like there are a lot of people that are married and have families, and like that's where your default mindset goes to is like I got to protect my family, and I feel like this movie kind of demonstrated that fairly well. Like that was a scary time. Like I would have been scared like in that scenario, and I could not help but think that like, what is this going to cost? How do the numbers work out? We saw that board.
Oh yeah,
a lot.
And she erased those numbers.
What the heck was that about? Like, we don't need numbers. We have the Holy Spirit. Like it's like, come on. Like, this is all garbage. Whatever my husband wrote here, like he wasn't taking into account how God will multiply things. It just, but like, yeah.
Lean not on your own understanding.
Yeah. What are you doing?
I'm going to take this off.
It did seem really silly, but at the same time, I do think our default is to use something like family or even friends as an excuse to not give and to not, sacrifice. I think if you're going to go one of those two directions, you're going to be like, well, no, because my family, definitely not me. It's my family.
Yeah. Maybe if I could, that's a good qualification. I'll qualify it even further, guys. This is how academic ethics goes. So if I knew that I could support a few more people, even at the cost of decreasing the total number of resources to my family, and like, all right, I could take a few more people in, and then we could ration this out and spread it out a bit more, then I would do that, right? Because that really is, again, that's like the point of virtue ethics. It's wise leadership and wise stewarding of certain virtues. So my compassion would drive me, or my my desire to give out of myself because of Christ would drive me to say, yes, I can take some of you, right? And I'll allow you or maybe one more family to come in because I have a family. So I get the value of wanting your family to have a good life. So that would make sense. I can't take two families though, right? Because we have limited resources and we can't just do that.
Yeah.
But then I'd have to ration that out.
And so like in the movie, how would you have just incorporated like one family at a time? That would have been interesting to kind of like, like we're going to do
So
interviews.
That's what Eric was saying. I think he really hit it on the head here. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying like, I would take interviews at the gate, basically saying, okay, what can you do to provide? And even the interviews would be difficult because if this person is very qualified, they show credentials like, hey, listen, I know about storing food. I'm an expert on storing food. Or a hydropower or whatever.
We make fireplaces.
But this person that comes in can be totally unethical. Take advantage of people, be a real jerk or whatever, and more so than that, be a criminal. How would you? I mean, that's one thing that you're saying. I agree with you 100%. They're taking our resources, but how can they give back?
Yeah, and it does seem like it would have been really difficult.
Let him answer here.
Very simple. Actually, it already solved itself in the movie and was already prepped and ready to go in the movie. He already had people he had relationships with prior right there at the gate. Those people that he's worked with at food banks. He's worked with personally That one wouldn't upset the dynamic of power within the structure, because you would have to be aware of that. Because if you let too many people in that say they want to open up the gates and let everyone in, and let even, turn over everything you have to the government and just let the government redistribute it, then you get overwhelmed. But you have people there, you let them in first, you integrate them into your group, and then you start looking at the people they know that are there, and they can give a good report for.
Yeah.
Well, I still think that, the first family, I think that was a little bit more of a given. They could have let them in. I think that would have been fine. That there was a relationship there. I do think things after that could get potentially more dicey, because, what if you know them, but they're actually, it's just a dude, without a family? What if there's a family no one knows at all, but they have a sick kid? There's this kind of really complicated moral kind of hierarchy that you kind of have to sift through. And then they see not everyone's going to agree with those decisions. And then other people are going to be at the gate hey, why are they going before I do? And they could get violent, that there's a lot of other things. So in some ways it does seem I don't want to agree with the wife entirely, but it does seem like an all or nothing could in some ways be better. But at the same time, it does not seem like
that's not practical.
It's not practical. It's not.
I'm going to mix. I'm
sorry.
Oh, go ahead if you want to.
Okay, that's why in those situations you need to have a written agreement ahead of time in how the power structure works. Say that's one of the things that annoyed me the most about this movie, is there was no clear chain of command.
Well, they mentioned in the movie
security guy that was kind of working with the homesteading guy, but at the same time he was kind of butting heads, and he's not really submitting to the guy a lot of the times. Where if you had a clear structure saying, hey, this is how it's going to work, and if you come in here and decide to live under this roof, you have to agree to follow these rules or you're out.
You set it up so perfect. You said it. All right, so it's great. I love that you said that, because that's what I was going to comment on. This movie is that was such a good setup. That was wonderfully said. This movie is a really good starting point for discussions on the philosophy of immigration into a nation, right? So this is actually really important. It's foundational. So a lot of people talk about immigration and integration. Well, the only way for you to actually have integration into a culture, because the main issue is not just illegal immigration. It's just immigration that has cultures being brought in that hate your main culture, right? Because even legal immigration, if it brings in cultures that despise you, isn't wise immigration, right? So what you need some sort of written document, say a constitution or something, so that, in a gubernatorial, an actual government sense, so that you have these written standards and you say, this is what our society, our civilization, our government, our laws, our judicial system is predicated upon. These values, and these values dole themselves out in these legal codes, and then judicially they're, weighed and measured these ways. So if you wish to join this nation, or if you want to, in this case, this homestead, you have to abide by these principles. If you fail to do so, then we're allowed to put you into, I don't know, some sort of place with bars to prevent them from escaping, like a prison, right? So what you basically need the homestead to do is to be a reflection of a government, as strange as that is. I know the movie kind of makes this tension between FEMA and saying all right, you can wait for that. But it in and of itself is a type of functional, mini nation. All groups are mini nations in terms of their, shared values. So I completely agree with you. I think if there was a constitution written out and people had to sign, and then there was a chain of command for execution of, not killing people, I mean execution of the laws. So saying hey, you have to hold to this, you have to do this. Then you can actually, if, as Ryan was saying, if there are some people who come in, you bring them in, and maybe they are productive individuals in the skill sense, but not ethically trustworthy, then you do have a chain of command that can deal with that. the necessity is some sort of chain of command and written. Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Jack. It's a local government instantiated in the homestead. So that's why it's so beneficial. And it could deal with Ryan's concerns, good concerns, by the way, about people who are just incorrect or lying and these nuanced takes. But then also, as Eric was saying, and also Elle before, you do have to have a framework, a foundation that people have to agree to and, put their hands on a Bible and whatever else, so that they have some sort of standard. And if they don't, fun fact, kick them out of the homestead. Bye-bye.
Yeah, so,
kick them out.
Can I say
on
something?
that kicking?
Oh, sorry. Were you saying?
I was going to say on that kicking out, I think it would apply to the people who are already there too, which was something that really annoyed me because there was a guy in the movie who was a security guard who wanted to start a coup. Out. Like, all right, some people would go so far as to say, kill them. I'm not really there, but out. You don't like the setup? Get out. It's not yours. Get out. So that's what my stance would be. Go ahead.
At that point, I'd have to say what sort of security risk he is. Like the government guy who came in and just started looking at everything. I'm like, dude, that is a huge security risk. He is going to be a pain in the rear end because he knows exactly what you have. He knows that you have all this gear and he's come. And when he comes, he'll make sure he can match tit for tat what you have. And that was like
different guy though. But Seth, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, so I felt like in the movie it's almost blending the two concepts of the church and the state, because like you guys are talking about sort of the governmental organizational part of it, but then I think also there's a parallel where it's this homestead is also operating as the church operates. And so like you look at the first century church and you see that by the world's conventional wisdom, they looked like a bunch of, pushovers. Really, they were always trying to, give to, whomever they could give to and do this and that. And they weren't resisting evil. But at the same time, there were certain rules in place. For example, there's a part where Paul says, if you don't work, you don't eat, so there were like guidelines. There were people that were marked as anathema in the sense of repeat offenses or like certain sins that the other believers would not even associate with them. And then there's also this sort of concept of a differentiation between, like the government that God has ordained, like in Romans 13, where it's talking about that. And I think a lot of people take like the Christian ethics of how the church operates and try to apply that to government to maybe argue for socialism or communism or whatever. And I think there is a distinction there. But I feel like the movie is sort of almost blurring the two, the church and the state, together in this one homestead. And so for me, my overall opinion on this is kind of a blend, and I may be in the minority here, but I feel like I would, instead of just looking at it as this government body, this local government body where, you're doing this and that, I feel like the church is kind of a part of it as well. And so I feel like seeking God would be, for me, a cornerstone of what are we going to do? Who are we going to let in? Whatever. And I feel like in that kind of situation, if you're genuinely seeking him, and I think this is biblical too, God would be faithful to reveal his will to you. And I know there's debates between continuationists and cessationists, and I'm not even really getting into all that, but just there is a biblical principle of seeking God and the Holy Spirit guiding you. And so I think that if you were doing that, you could, seek God's will on your individual circumstances. See, does God want you to let all of these people in? Does God want you to not let that person specifically in if that's a wolf in sheep's clothing? Does God want you to do this or do that? And so I think that's like a really big, important thing that defies conventional human wisdom of cold, hard, calculated facts, but that is like a really big part of the Christian walk, where it's like God's wisdom is, just so much different that it seems it's foolishness to us. But then the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom. And so I would combine that with the sort of the charter idea of, hey, there are rules, there are guidelines, there are things that if you don't follow, then by the simple agreement between us, you're outing yourself of this community. And you agree to that if you're going to come in. And I think that would be completely fair. So I kind of like meld the two ideas. Is sort of
So I think you're good with that. And let me back up a little bit with Eric's response to say, hey, I didn't like this movie because they handled this a little bit. I'm going to give them a little bit of grace, because I think this is what's showing is originally this is a rich guy up in the hills. He had the idea, hey, things can go bad. I want to provide for my family, maybe a little bit extra for my friends and stuff like that. And he really went all out with everything he had there. He took the prepper. I mean, he was a super prepper, right? And then people coming in. The big question that's asked in this movie is, well, then what? And if hindsight's 50-50 here, or 100%, whatever, that you would give him clarity to say, listen, I really should have thought about this ahead of time. How am I going to handle all this? So I think what we're saying is what we would do in that situation too, and not necessarily that the film was bad in handling it. It was showing a guy that did not handle it well. He didn't think he was smart, but he didn't think it far enough ahead. And as far as the church and state thing goes, family units, smaller units, they're basically based on socialism to an extent, to totalitarian socialism. If the father is in charge, but that doesn't extend well to larger organizations like a town or a nation. So
yeah, that's right. I would add, just so you know, I think, Seth, you're not in the minority view. I do think all of us would actually agree with this mixture view. Even when Eric is positing the possibility of some sort of constitution or charter as this order of authority, I'm sure that Eric would be including in that Christian ethics per the scripture, right? Elle even brought up Bible verses, as did Eric, and all of us did at some point. So I don't think you're actually in the minority view. I think we'd all be quite in agreement with you on the notion of this fusion. The difficulty is just how the fusion would look. Is I think where it would be. But I do agree with you that the fusion is necessary. So, biblical principles, right? If you're going to be here, you better be okay with us being Christian leaders and us holding to Christian ethics and us, if you're going to be here, just understand, because I actually really like what you said, Seth, about praying to God for wisdom on who to let in, who to not let in. Have that in charter. Say, as a Christian group with Christian ethics and Christian leadership, do understand that at times we will be praying for God's wisdom on who to let in and who to not let in. And you cannot, just barge in on this discussion if we have this general consensus by the Holy Spirit giving us all wisdom on who ought to be let in and who should not be let in on that moment. So there are ways to combine it. And I think that's really the beauty of the charter. It's a constitutional form of biblical ethics that people have to agree with, right? You come in here, you can't just, be like, oh, I hate Christians, I'm going to kill them all because whatever. It's like, no, it's bad. Stop. We don't like that.
I do want to say this really quick before we move on, just kind of talking about the whole church and state thing. I think we've all seen in history examples of really big disasters of the church operating as the governmental authority as well. And I think it really does beg the question of what is actually the church and what is not. And I think there have been times in history where this thing that calls itself the church is actually just another human entity that's not even following the will of God at all. And I think that corruption can, throughout history, kind of erode and just disintegrate what was a church-led, Christ-led, God-led movement into just another human body calling itself, the oracle of God. And so I think that's something that would have to be very carefully fought against as well, spiritually speaking.
And on that note, I do also want to add, as far as the socialism thing that was brought up, it is a component of the movie. It is a component of just thinking about how this works in general. One of the claims that we hear a lot is, the Bible is pro-socialism or whatever, communism, whatever you want to fill in the blank with that thing that they're trying to promote. Because in Acts, we see that the body of Christ was selling their possessions and sharing essentially the resources. But something very, very, very important I want to stress here is biblically, the example we're given, people are doing this willingly. People are choosing to do these things. People are sharing with others out of their own choice, making those decisions. You could argue, well, the two people who didn't, who kept back some for themselves, they were killed by God. That's not the situation. They weren't killed because they didn't give everything. They were killed because they lied to God, to others. They were trying to be like, look at how good we are while being evil. not evil for keeping some for themselves, but evil in lying. So verses in the movie, what's put forward is, against your will, at gunpoint, you give up all of your family's resources to potentially go to help other people, essentially. And also in the situation as far as letting people in. Look, we would be happy to share with you, but like, this isn't just going to be a freeload. You sit there and expect us to spoon feed you the whole time. We talked about how the Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat. Something else on that is Joseph. I think Joseph is a wonderful story. The story of Joseph is a wonderful thing to consider with this movie, because what happens, there's a time of famine and nobody else except for Egypt has food. But what happens, because God prepared Joseph and he had stored up, Joseph made the decisions. Pharaoh said, hey, go to Joseph, see what he wants to do. And what happens is, we see in Genesis 41:56 through 57. So when the famine had spread all over the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all of the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain, because the famine was severe all over the earth. It's not the situation where Joseph just went, you have some grain, you have some grain, we all have some grain. It was, we have enough for our nation. Come buy it. We have enough for the world. Now that our nation is taken care of, come buy it. At least that's how it seems to be presented to me. And that doesn't necessarily have to be with cha-ching, because what good is paper money that's thrown on the ground to pay for a car that you just stole in an apocalyptic situation. But it does show, like, hey, like, this person can do this work and this person can do that work. It's not just a handout. It's, as I've heard some people say recently, a hand up. Like, let's work together and do this together. You get this, we get that. So that's what I wanted to add. And that's the righteous, it seems to be presented as the righteous way the Bible shows to provide in times of need, in obviously still certain circumstances. We also see what the unrighteous do in times of need, though, and hunger. And that's, we see in prophecy, and then we see the fulfillment of that in Jeremiah, how it's prophesied that people would, like, eat their own kids and not even share with their families their own kids. And we see the evil and disgusting revoltingness of that. They'd be so evil that they won't even share with their family, but they take away from their own family and from everyone. And so we do see that God provides, but there's good structure for that, and that is not the good way. Just to throw that out there.
Okay, great. I'm going to take a look at the chat here. We got some comments that came in. This is one of our earlier discussion. We were talking about setting up a government and stuff like that. Governments, local governments, town charters, and history repeating. Jack Bray mentioned 1600s North American settlement history at John Smith, Jamestown. This has to do with how they handled these situations in early history. So this is something that is faced us before in the past. How did different organizations handle it? And he said, so you guys are going to start prepping after watching this movie? I'm going to put that out as a question. Did this movie change any of your concepts or your ideas about what you should do to prep for, who knows, the feces hitting the rotating oscillator?
Not really, no.
No.
I would say
for me a little bit, but go on. What would you say?
Kind of. In the sense of right now, I'm not properly managing the things that we currently have. That's something that I'm working on. And I think the present and near future, Lord willing, is the priority. And once those things are established, then going forward, potentially doing more. I think that we do see a good biblical principle of how are you supposed to share if you don't have things to share. If you weren't wise with your resources in advance, it makes it a lot harder to be wise with your resources in the future. God could still provide. God can override. But I do think that there is something biblical about having resources in advance, potentially, like Joseph did. And that was obviously the right call. God showed him what to do in that circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't changed too much. I will say I did like the mentions of Bitcoin and Tesla and the consideration of Tesla vehicles and Bitcoin in an apocalyptic scenario, what that means and pros and cons to that. So those are cool little drops to think of here and there. The insignificance of paper money in an apocalyptic scenario, like, you know, that's actually interesting. But when it comes to getting a whole lot of food and stacking all my Chef Boyardee, I mean, I don't really need a reason to stack Chef Boyardee. That stuff tastes good, so I just have it. It made me think about some things in terms of vehicles and money. But besides that, when it comes to resources and preparing for the end or a nuclear bomb, part of me is like, Lord, just please come back before that happens. And of course, I guess a lot of us probably were thinking through different eschatologies. Maybe that was going through our minds at some point. I know this isn't an eschatological movie because there's no like coming of Christ. It's like a small apocalypse or a small destructive event, right? Mm-hmm. But still, I think going through the film, the thing that I really was thinking about is less like prep for the end, but when is the end? And is it pre-mill, on-mill, post-mill? Where exactly does that go? So my brain went into a little theological deep dive, and I lost about 10 minutes of the film because of that. Because I was just like,
you faced it.
Oh yeah, there's a film happening. I completely whoops.
I love that you said that, David, because that actually reminds me of something else I thought when I was watching it, is that whenever people think of like prepping for some disaster, even like in the Christian world, they think of like physical preparations, resources, all of that. But like none of us are really quick to think about spiritual preparation either. I think it's 1 Timothy, maybe it's 2 Timothy, where Paul says physical training is of some value, but spiritual training is essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but it's much more valuable. And so it's like these physical, like preparing for physical things has value. It really does. But also so does like godly training and instruction. And I think if you're like a man, for example, trying to lead his family, even if you have a bunch of resources, if you have not been walking with God, seeking God, and spiritually preparing yourself, you are building on a shaky foundation. And so I think that's a really important thing as well. And ultimately, God is the sovereign master of all the resources anyway. He could give you whatever you need. But if you're not walking with him, it's kind of irrelevant because you're not having that sanctification process anyway. So I think that's like a big thing to kind of be looking at, whether Jesus comes back before the tribulation or after the tribulation, or if there is a tribulation, regardless of all of that, it's like, are we spiritually preparing ourselves for the coming of Christ? So I think that's like a big thing too.
That's a very good point. Very good point. And I think that might be, although we could easily have another 6 hours of discussion here, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. Seriously, I want to talk for another few hours, but we got to limit our live stream a little bit here. And so when you get down to it, we may never live through the apocalypse or some sort of societal collapse. But we are challenged to regularly about how much we give of ourselves. At what point should we give? At what point does that giving end? And how do we balance that out with our own responsibilities for family and so forth that are a biblical mandate as well? The answer to give of our lives, because in the end, our lives do not belong to us. They were purchased by someone else, and we are blood-bound and honored to follow his commands. So balance it all out, seek scripture, and like you said, Seth, make sure that that we are in good standing with the Lord, following, walking with him, so that no matter what comes down the pipe, disaster or prosperity, that we are focused on him and giving of ourselves to the others. So coming up, do you guys have anything that you want to talk about, any activities or any live streams or anything like that you have coming up that you want to make people aware of?
For me, actually, I'm about to go on my first missions trip, and incidentally, my first out of country trip. So that's pretty big. We're going to South Africa. Going to help finished building and establishing like a camp for children there. It's kind of like a school and like a youth camp at the same time, but basically like a lot of people there are very impoverished and they don't have like good places to go and spend time at. And so this is like a thing where they can learn about God and be like in a safe environment. Because in that area, there's actually like a lot of violence, a lot of carjacking, stabbings, all sorts of things. And so this is like a safe haven for them. And so we're working to like try and make that organization self-sustainable. So really excited for that. Yeah, but so.
Cool. Very good. So if you guys remember, pray for Seth. When does this come out? When are you leaving?
So I'm about to head to North Carolina, actually, Lord willing, tomorrow to meet up with the team. And we're going to have like a few prep days and I'll spend Christmas over there. And then Lord willing, on the 30th, we're flying out. And so I'll be there until January 7th. So.
Wow. Wow. Very exciting. All right. Does anybody else have anything that they want to let people know about?
Yeah. I'm not doing anything as amazing as that. Thank God for you, Seth. That's wonderful. That's a blessing to the whole body of Christ. On my channel, I'm hoping to start. I've already been doing this a bit with a video I released on pro-life, pro-choice debate and how to argue for the value and sanctity of life. I've been using a lot of the debates I've done with my students and just turning, I want to turn a lot of those into videos so people can see the value of logical debate and how Christians can think more logically and rationally to help people understand our position. I'm hoping to do a few more of those videos and splice them into a lot more shorts so that people can just have access to, how to talk and reason with atheists about Christian principles and hopefully show them not just the truth of our Christian principles, but the truth of our foundation, which is Christ. So a lot more videos on the way.
I just want to say this just before we move on. It looks like in the comments, Nicodemus said South Africa violence, BRICS is taking over. So I'm not sure what exactly the point of that is, if that's a joke or whatnot. But I will say this. I'm not saying all of South Africa is like full of violence. I don't know about the other geographical locations. I know that on the east side is primarily more of the poverty areas, and on the west side, there are more of the wealthy areas. The demographics are different all over, but what I'm saying is the specific place that I'm going, like the very specific place that I'm going to happens to be very high in crime and especially violent crime. And so the goal is to help the kids that are in that area have like a safe place to live, or not to just live, but to be able to go as like a little safe haven.
So people should be praying for your safety as well.
Yes, there actually is a fair amount of danger involved. Again, I'm not saying that South Africa as a whole, that specific part of South Africa that I'm going to near the city of Pretoria is where that's at. And so there are like a lot of violent crimes there.
Wow. Wow.
So I'll go ahead and plug what I got coming up. Tomorrow I have got the topper to my most pagan Christmas tree ever to put on my tree coming out. That'll probably come out like noon EST tomorrow. And then tomorrow evening, we'll be doing the year-end review for my channel. So the Christmas party year-end review.
Those are always fun.
Yeah, and then I got a live stream with Hatun on the 29th and 30th yet. So it should be fun.
Okay.
I would like to get out a Christmas video, but I realize that we are like literal days away. So we'll see. But I have a video that I've started writing about Islam versus Christmas, essentially,
Wow.
and exploring those avenues and how we can use that as reaching out to Muslims who are typically anti-Christmas, but still potentially open to hearing gospel through those opportunities.
Okay. I'm going to be also joining Hatun Tash. We're going to be doing that year-end review. And then next month with her, and it may bleed over into my channel as well if we don't cover some of the aspects with her, we're going to be going over the myth of the Andalusian paradise. I say Andalusian because some parts of Spain they list. So Under the Sea in Paradise, this is the idea that, oh, Muslim Spain, it was so good. They had all the classics. You wouldn't have that if it weren't for us. Well, we're going to go over and say what a bunch of basically lies those are, and we're going to pick it apart and look at the actual sources, look at the actual history, what's behind it, and get a better picture, because this is really starting to become a big talking point among secularists and Muslims as well, saying, you know, Christianity isn't all that good. Look at Islam. Islam was so great. And you have this golden age that was here, and they were so wonderful. Tolerance. Everybody was tolerant during that time. No, that was not the case. So we're going to be delving deeper into that as well. So with that, I want to wish everybody adieu. Merry Christmas if we don't see you again. Happy New Year's. And may you always be following Christ into this next year and beyond.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.